Welcome back to another episode. Today's topic is Audible. Now, regardless of whether you know anything about sports or not, I wanted to teach you something about sports today that can actually help you win the game of life. And there's a lot of parallels, even if you may not realize it, between sports and real life. Because if you look at each as being in a game, there's a lot you can do knowing what rules are in place, what methods and techniques are used for success. Doesn't matter what medium you're in, whether it's sports or whether it's outside of sports. And so the reason we're actually going to be talking about Audible today is that it is a technique that's used in the game of football, and it's used by quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are the play callers within a football game. And on the defensive side, you may also have a defensive lead that's also calling out plays on the defense. But regardless of whatever side you're on, those play callers dictate what the offense or defense is actually going to do. And so it's used within football, or an audible is, to change a play at the last minute. And if anything, look at it as negotiation that actually happens on the field as things are actually going on and as they're happening. And you see it in all types of competition. I'll discuss a few different types in a few moments, but you see it everywhere. So football calls it an audible, but again, you may hear different terms that are actually used across different industries, but you can use audible, you can add that to your list today. So when one side changes its strategy to expose the weakness of another, that is an audible. All right. Now, some examples of that. If you've ever seen sports, particularly football, there's a trick play called the flea flicker. I remember growing up and playing some video games with a few friends. What a flea flicker was, in football, there's two basic types of plays. There are running plays and there are passing plays. And so an offense that's looking at a defense trying to figure out how they can expose a weakness, the defense may be really bad at running or protecting against the run defense. So with that, the offensive team may create a threat of the run, right? And so in that case, it may force the defense to throw everyone that it has on the line of scrimmage to try to attack the ball for a run. But in actuality, the quarterback could call a trick play, or call an audible for a trick play, called a flea flicker, where the running back takes the ball, starts to run, and then throws it back to the quarterback. But since everyone's at the line of scrimmage, the quarterback can then throw a long pass, let's say in the end zone, to one of his receivers. So that's an example where an audible might be a very effective tool depending on what the offense is essentially going against. Another example, if you've ever seen the movies, Rocky IV. I'm a Philadelphia native, so Rocky IV was a big one because it's when Rocky fought Drago. And Drago was this huge Russian that just looked like he could tear anything apart, and it was like a David and Goliath story. And the example of the audible was when Rocky's coach told him to attack Drago's strengths. So you don't really hear that, but that change of strategy was huge because as they were passing blow to blow, Rocky just, I guess, had a superior drive and maybe workout technique to just survive all the hits. I remember Drago saying that hitting Rocky was like hitting a piece of iron. Now, regardless of that being a movie, that was a change in strategy. And then the third one I actually remember doing myself was I had a college project where I had an eMuse. I had this little accelerometer that made different pitch sounds as you moved it around, and everybody had a presentation. And I was kind of speechless because I had nothing planned. So I had to go up on stage and figure out what I was going to do. And sure enough, I decided to call an audible, take off my shirt, and actually start flexing for the judges. Why? Because one of the judges was female, and I figured that was my best bet. And it must have paid off because I got second place, right? So that audible was something that I just had to do an improv with just last minute. Now, the greats, you've probably already seen them in one capacity or another, but the greats are comfortable at being uncomfortable. And some examples of them are Tony Robbins. He actually has an ice cold bath every morning. If you've ever taken an ice cold shower, I imagine that an ice cold bath is just on another level altogether. He's got this little pool where he literally just jumps in and just head above water and everything in ice cold water, right? That's a big shock. Now, here's the thing. He's made that a part of his routine. Um, the more often you do it, the more comfortable you will get. But that first one's got to be a shocker, right? But that's the whole idea, just getting yourself to be in an uncomfortable situation so that you know exactly sort of how to respond. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, along the same lines, they both had relentless work ethics. That means they practice until they didn't even have to think about it anymore. It was all in muscle memory. And part of that is what's necessary in order to be able to change what you do in a given situation. And both of them were very talented at what they did, but they were coachable. That was the biggest thing. They were coachable. They recognized they did not know everything, and they were always looking to learn and add more to their game. And then last but not least, if you ever watched Man vs. Wild, Bear Grylls, I don't think you can have a greater arena to call audibles than in the wild. And again, I just recommend catch a show and see what this man actually goes through to make it through a challenge. And not only him, but sometimes he'll take on folks that have never done anything like it before, and he has to make sure that not just he is safe, but also whoever his guest is also safe. So there's a big challenge in that, right? So he's got to be able to think on the fly and change as things actually happen. Now, with the Audible, there are great times to use it, and I've given you a few examples where it's actually worked, but there are some really awful times and ways to actually use it as well, and I did not want to miss that. So if you ever make a first choice of something, don't just make an Audible because it seems like a good idea. Most of the reasons that Audibles actually fail are that people or teams don't practice them often enough, right? Imagine you're working to do something and you don't have any practice whatsoever. The odds of you failing are huge. Outside of that, you may have players, coaches, or whoever you're working with is not in sync. So if you're practicing really hard, but the folks that you're working with aren't, those results are going to be very varied across the board. Also, the situations that you're actually within, you need to actually be able to read them, and that actually comes from practice. But if you can't read the situation, you might actually read it the wrong way and choose a wrong result as a result. If you get bad advice, be very cognizant of who you're actually getting advice from. If it's someone who hasn't done what it is you're trying to do before, their advice may mean absolutely nothing to you. Having bad plays you've never practiced before, putting in something new without at least testing it and seeing what the results are actually going to be. Having bad players, sometimes teammates aren't all they're cracked up to be, so make sure you're cognizant of whoever you're choosing there. But probably one of the biggest ones that you won't hear very often is a rigged game. Now in sports, you have your rules, everything's kind of set in stone for the most part, but there's also rigged games out there. So even if you put an Audible in place and you think it's enough for you to win, if you don't know the rules, you can't win the game. That's probably the biggest one right there. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation on Audible. I hope that you add this to your playbook if you don't already have it. Audibles are something that are used throughout our world, throughout society, and it's something that you need to have and need to be able to execute against, because you never know when you have to pull that Audible card and you have to change your mind because there's something you see that means something huge in regards to your advantage if you pick the right play to orient yourself towards it. So I hope you enjoyed this talk, and I have more in store, so stay tuned. I'll catch you on the next clip. All right, bye.